everybody. Welcome to Cracking Pet Chat. It is always great to see all of you. I know you're so busy. And you know what? Lorin and I have been pretty busy ourselves. Lorin, you and I were recently at one of the industry's biggest trade shows. So I thought we'd just kind of share with the folks out there, all those pet parents, what are some of the latest trends, some of the things that they'll be looking at and seeing if they're not already seeing it. But I know your experience may have been different than mine. So maybe start off with what you see from the pet parent's eyes.
Yeah, this show was a little bit differently laid out than normal, so it was interesting to navigate that. Um, there's the typical new product showcase, emerging brands, that sort of thing. I didn't see a lot of, oh wow, of new things. I saw a lot of the same thing with a different package. Different name on it, different, um, it's not even a different spin. I mean, there's only so many ways you can spin the same product. So,
Right.
um, it's interesting. It was a little bit disappointing from that standpoint. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, little some new innovation. I didn't see a lot of that. And what I did see that was innovative, and I won't call them out here, were things that just begged 1,000 questions. Because it was like maybe they rushed to market to make the trade show. And I did some follow-up, and the websites weren't pulled together well, and the frequently asked questions weren't complete. So if I were going as a retailer, to take a look at that show and pull things from my store, those are items that I would have been interested in, but never would have brought in from that show. So I think that there's some, there might be a little bit of a lull in new innovations. Oh, I did see one cool thing, which was both gross and cool, because those two things can go
Good
together.
tell.
Um, and it was freeze-dried frog legs, and it was the body of the frog and the legs. It was trippy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As
that's a
someone
new
who has a
treat to
freeze
chew on.
dryer, I can assure you that is not something I will be doing anytime
I thought
soon.
for sure you would, because you're all into the bug stuff.
I That's a bridge too far for me. That is so funny. Oh man, I'm glad I didn't see that.
Those
Yeah,
I would have brought in. Those because I love all those parts, and it's a
sure.
unique protein. So that was something innovative that I was like, oh, good on you. I would not have thought of that, which is also weird because I lived in Europe for a while, and that's a big thing there. But it never occurred to me to turn that into because I also would think how long lasting of a chew is that?
Yeah.
But I still would have brought it in just because I love all that cool, weird stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't want to say a sucker for that, but I am always interested when I see unique proteins, unique, offerings. And I think that's one of the things that did catch my eye. There was a couple of cool things. So I'm going to give it, this is interesting because this year I really went with an open mind, no expectations. And I really thought I had a similar experience you did, where it was, still a huge show, a lot of brands there, the new product showcase. I kind of felt like you did, where it was, there were a lot of new things that I just questioned what the label new really means. In years
Hmm.
past, I really was excited to see new categories, new innovations, new evolutions. And I just felt like this year I saw a lot of changing of packaging, rewording,
Hmm.
rebranding, things like that. And or this expansion and explosion, which is probably my biggest takeaway, of brands that were expanding their lines. So technically, it was new to their line, but
Sure.
it just didn't. wow me the way, and it wasn't just the dog category or the cat category or the fish or the bird. It just seemed like across the board. Um, Not saying that there weren't some things that I went, oh, that is cool. There were certainly several things that I noted that I liked, and I thought some of the innovations were like, okay, that's cool. The problem was for me as I walked this show, and this is a huge show. I mean, if it's not the largest, it is pretty darn close to the largest. Because everybody wants to argue those things. I'm not going to judge that right here.
Sure.
Um, but what struck me was as you walked the floor, there was, it just kept saying, wow, they've expanded into that. That's interesting. Not a condemnation, not a like, wow, I'm really excited either. It was just a, okay. They must have been listening to Lauren about white labeling, because there were so many companies that had expanded their lines into things that I just kind of went, I wouldn't even look to you for that product.
So like an example would be like a grooming line that expanded into treats, or a treat line that expanded into leashes. I mean,
Yeah,
really random, really kind of like how do these two things go together? And that happens from time to time, but you're right, it does seem like there's more of that going on. But that also kind of piqued my interest because that is sort of a statement on the economy, I think.
right. Yeah,
It's like how do we remain relevant and build on the trust of our name for our, customers, both the retailers and the consumers. And but some of it you're like, hmm, that I'm not sure that that translates. And I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Other brands have done it and they've been truly successful at it, but it really comes down to how well it's handled. One of the things that I like in years past, I have seen medical type diets coming to market that have not been, um, in my opinion, uh, the kind that I would probably feed or carry, just because of how they were put together and, and everybody's got an opinion. So, um, you can find a vet to sign off on anything anywhere, it seems like. But this year, new veterinary diets, or veterinary quality, veterinary grade, actually created and designed by vets that were things that I would bring in, that I was like, finally, this is available in a retail store for a pet parent. That's amazing. That's something that has been sorely needed for a long time. That wasn't just called that and then a Band-Aid, type
yeah,
thing. So I was happy to see that. There were some great little forks in the road where things were fabulous and also things were weird, and then they seemed to converge back to the same things again, like we were talking about, with just a different label on it.
yeah. It's interesting too on the foods. There just seems to be so many options.
Mhm.
I mean, it is overwhelming, and there are some elements that I'm happy to see, kind of like what you just said, some quality improvements, some preparation improvements too that I kind of
Mhm.
liked. I even saw more than I thought I would see in the home preparer side of things. And while they don't fit my needs, I'm not sure if they fit your needs, but they don't fit mine. Having conversations with those folks, I was encouraged that the marketplace itself understands that we as pet parents, we want to do better. We're doing better on our own, whether it's made available to us or not through the traditional systems. And so, I like that there's an understanding out there. What I don't like is there's just so much noise and there's so many claims that are just not substantiated the second you drive
Right. Right.
had 11 pet parents who love this. That's not really a study. That's a group of folks who are like-minded.
Yeah,
More
we fed this for 2 weeks and we had amazing results
Yeah,
for
exactly.
2 weeks.
For 2 weeks, yeah. I think the other thing too that was interesting to me is, I've said it probably till I'm blue in the face, is I don't need to see more toys. I don't need to see more leashes. I don't need to see more collars. And yet, sure enough, there they were. I say the same thing about beds. I will say I saw some beds that um, I literally said to myself, wow, I know I'm off my rocker now as a pet parent because I would love to get that for Belle, and I would have that bed just right next to the bed I sleep in, just so she's got her own. So in the middle of the night when she's feeling like, hey, you're too restless, she can just scooch over into that bed. But there were some innovations. I think one of the things that also caught me, and when I would stop and talk to folks, was that when I'd ask them, is this meant for what size of animal and how old and this and that? The standard answer, oh, all.
All
And
life stages.
yeah, and I'd be like, I understand that's your goal, but what's the reality? And I found that to be frustrating a little bit because there were some things that I saw, especially in the toy side. It's like, oh, it's indestructible, and oh, it's chew resistant, and I was like, ah, I if I hand that off to Bell or Sugar, they would have destroyed that in a day at most. Um, and so I would try and give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'd say maybe this is for a smaller animal. Same thing with the cat toys and treats. I'm always intrigued by those. Mostly because I want to surprise Jackson, my sister's cat, with like, see, I brought you back something, and then I rarely ever find something that I think Jackson is going to be stoked on. But I feel overall it was really it was just really that expansion that just kind of blew my mind. I was like, we are going to see a lot of folks having a lot of excess inventory
Hmm.
because there is just no differentiation. And, it goes back to discussions you and I have had in practical pet business, where we've said, make sure you're not one of 50. Because if you're one of 50,
Right.
what's the differentiation point? And that's what I just kept asking myself as I would see all of these expansions. It was like everybody does treats, everybody does this, everybody does supplement. And I'm like, and they'd see me and they'd say, hey, Rob, hey, it's good to see you. And I'm like, yeah, see you like really expanded. Yeah, yeah. Like, so what's unique about these? Well, we really put an emphasis on nutrition or functional. And I'd be like, okay, you got the buzzwords, but where's the delivery of that?
Right.
So I'm not convinced that as I walked the floor, I saw that. I will tell you, you had the frog one. One of the more interesting ones that I got hung up on. And it was funny because this is just how awesome the pet world is. Um, I, get a lot of birds into my backyard, and, we've got the squirrel circus and we got tons of hummingbirds and all these great, I live in a park basically, and not in a van at the park, but I live in the park. And I'm telling you, I was so enthralled with this one bird feeder camera system. And I've seen a bunch of them. And you go onto any big store, big box store, site, et cetera, and you see 50 of these. But I really thought they had elevated it. And I was letting them know, I was like, man, I'm really interested. You know what I'd love to see is I'm getting involved with beehives. And I'd love to be able to have something like this in with the beehive. I just think it would be fascinating. And they pulled me to the back of the little booth and said, you know what would be cool? This. And here's our prototype. That's what I love about these shows is like sometimes you just get these like really cool sneak peeks. And so I spent some time there, and they were like, "You could put this in that beehive box, and man, you're just going to be entertained as all get out." So that was my funny one. I saw some other unique ones, and I got to give credit to the show sponsors because they had something unique that I really loved, which was kind of these mini booths. And I really thought that was smart on so many different levels because
Emerging brands.
yeah, emerging brands. And I
Mhm.
felt like it gave those folks a chance to be there where they might not otherwise financially have decided to go there. And I really enjoyed that section quite a bit. Um, and you and I have talked over the years, right? It's so funny because they try and segment, all the trade shows do this. It's like, oh, here's our natural pathway, and then here's our clothing pathway, fashion pathway. And then, you've got these, mega booths that are, just the size of a football field for some of the big players. So I thought this was a good innovation. I also loved they had a lot of education going on. And even though I didn't go to much of that education, there were some folks that I talked to that found some really good value and all that. So, if you find yourself as a pet parent, because you're involved in the industry, attending some of these, don't, count that out. There were some speakers there that folks don't normally get access to hearing. I thought that was great. And I can't let this one go because I was standing there as you fed a couple of tigers, right? I mean, at least my creative grooming folks made me very proud.
Yeah. 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 I think one was a little pink spotted leopard and another one was a small tiger design. Those are always fun. The grooming section was in a completely different area this time, which I think was good. We
Yeah,
just didn't see as much as normal, because they didn't need to traverse that much of the show. Um,
sure.
but the creative grooming stuff is always fun. There's always new stuff coming out with that. And the education stuff for that grooming area is really positive. And there's some new things that are innovative that are happening for grooming in general. So I did like that. I would like to see, yes, there's a lot of food options, but right now, my two are going through a picky period. I had 12 dogs. They were never picky. I mean, right up through being seniors and everything else, they were never picky. I got two little monsters that, are little prima donna princesses, and we've turned into short order cooks and we're on our knees begging. So I'm constantly looking for more and better food options. So I welcome that because they're not all the same. That's the one thing that, yes, it might be the same flavor or something like that. But when you look at the ingredient listing, it matters what the other ingredients are. And if
Yeah,
you know that your dog doesn't like, I don't know, something in the ingredients, and you can find other options, because I know when I had my store, people are like, I can't do that. I can't do a fish oil. There can't be fish oil in the food. Do
yeah,
you know what kind of fish oil it is? Yeah, it's salmon oil. Can't do that. And it took time before we started to see other oils that were being put, to meet the requirements for making pet food. And that really made a difference for a lot of animals. So the more innovation in pet food, the more variation in recipes and formulations, the better. I would, of course, still also like to see improvements, in the quality continue. Um, Treats, uh, I don't, short of the frog's legs. I don't know what else. There is, a few more exotic things. There's antelope and
yeah,
ostrich and emu that's more prevalent than it used to be. The exotic proteins are really, really important, I think, and we need more of them. And I know the antelope company is coming out with more unique options. And I really applaud that because I really think that that's something we need rather than the standards. And then in toys, I'm a sucker for toys. So I feel differently about that. I want to see toys, toys, toys. My two dogs probably have 300 toys, and they have toy boxes in different rooms, and they'll go and they'll pick what they're going to play with out of that. And then they'll go pick something else. And then an hour later, they pick something else. And then before bed, we're picking it all up. And that way they can pick it out again tomorrow. But they're always excited to get toys, and toys are always fun, and they're generally inexpensive. And, it doesn't matter if they're unique. It just matters that when you bring that toy home to your pet, whatever kind of pet you have, it doesn't have to be a dog. It can be a hamster or something. They get excited, and you see that, and that's an exchange of joy and bonding. So I love the toys. I think the toys are great. There are some more expanded options of chews that I saw. I think those are important as well. I'm a little nervous about companies that say guaranteed not to splinter. It's like indestructible toys. I never, ever, I had companies send me indestructible toys to test out. And because that was the only way I'd bring them in. Let me test it. Let me give it to some clients and see, what their pets do, and then call them back and go, yeah, this is what it looks like, your indestructible toy. And no, it wasn't a big dog. That happened to be a Chihuahua. So no, that's not indestructible. And then the non-splintering bones, I stress over those.
Yeah.
So, those absolute statements are nerve-wracking. And pet parents out there, everything should still be under supervision. It doesn't matter what the packaging says. You make sure that you're paying attention and you're looking at your indestructible, non-splintering, non-problematic item that they're playing with or chewing on, because you don't know that 100%.
Yeah. No, I agree. I love seeing the toys. And speaking of that, I also love. I like to get over to the aquatic world, the reptile
Hmm.
world, and I did see some cool evolutionary things in terms of habitats and really engagement in both areas. Some of it I loved, others I was like, okay, gimmicky, but you know what? I can see why it attracts eyeballs.
Sure.
Uh, and I think that's one of the like fun things about these conferences that are that big. Whatever kind of pet you have, there just seem to be not one or two things, but hundreds of things there now. And
Right.
so for, those of us who have been going for 15, 20 years to these events, I just, sometimes, not to sound like the angry old guy, screaming, get off my lawn, but it was just like, huh, you know, I used to be able to gravitate in to the best in class, the folks who were deeply, truly passionate about everything that was in their booth. And I think that's where it threw me a little bit this year was because so many booths had so many different things. I felt it was a little bit almost, generic across the board instead
Redundant. Hmm.
yeah, instead of that deep passion where when I went to one booth, I knew what they were about. I could ask them specific questions, get those detailed answers, and I just felt so much more empowered. And so that's probably the thing I missed, in terms of the differences for those who haven't been there. But fun conversation, fun event. If you went or you go to some local show, let us know what you're looking at, what you're seeing out there. You can send us an email to practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Let us know on all our different social media networks and, share this with a friend. We really appreciate you taking time with us. As always, thanks for joining us here on Practical Pet Chat.
Bye, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk.
Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat. All rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.